caretaker's voice echoed in my mind as I stood alone in the dimly lit hallway of the school. "Never stay in the school after dark," he had warned us, his eyes filled with an unusual seriousness. But curiosity got the better of me. As the last bell rang and students rushed out, I slipped into the shadows, determined to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden in these corridors. The empty halls felt eerie, the silence only broken by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud as I walked past the rows of lockers. The air was cool, almost chilly, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and continued down the hall. I reached a section of the school I had never ventured into before. The doors here were old and worn, the paint peeling off in long strips. One door in particular caught my eye. It was slightly ajar, the darkness beyond it inviting yet menacing. I pushed it open, my heart pounding in my chest, and stepped inside. The room was filled with dusty old records and strange, faded photographs. Papers were scattered across the floor, and the air was thick with the scent of mold. As I sifted through the documents, a cold shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic set in, and I ducked behind a large cabinet, trying to remain as silent as possible. The caretaker entered the room, his face shadowed and unreadable. He began rummaging through the papers, muttering to himself. My heart raced as I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. After what felt like an eternity, he left the room, closing the door behind him. I let out a sigh of relief, my curiosity now mingled with fear. What was he looking for? And why was this room so secretive? I knew I had to find out more. The mystery of the caretaker's warning and the hidden room consumed my thoughts as I quietly slipped out of the school, my mind already planning my return the next night. The next night, I returned to the school, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. This time, I was more prepared. I brought a flashlight and a small backpack with supplies, determined to uncover the secrets that had eluded me the previous night. The caretaker's warning echoed in my mind, but I pushed it aside. Curiosity was my driving force. Navigating the darkened corridors, I made my way back to the mysterious room. The atmosphere was heavy, and every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified in the silence. I opened the door cautiously and slipped inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was just as I had left it, filled with old records and photographs. I began to search more thoroughly, my hands trembling slightly. Among the piles of papers, I found a set of old yearbooks and attendance records. As I flipped through them, I noticed several names crossed out with red ink. My curiosity grew. Why were these students singled out? What had happened to them? Suddenly, I heard footsteps again. I quickly turned off my flashlight and hid behind the cabinet, my heart racing. The caretaker entered the room, his expression tense. He went straight to the same pile of papers he had searched the previous night. This time, he took out a large, bound journal and began reading it intently. I strained to see what was written, but the angle was wrong. After a few minutes, he put the journal back and left the room, locking the door behind him. I waited for the sound of his footsteps to fade before coming out of my hiding spot. I approached the cabinet where he had placed the journal, my hands shaking with anticipation. I opened it and found the journal buried beneath a stack of old files. The journal contained detailed notes about the students whose names were crossed out in the yearbooks. It spoke of strange occurrences, disappearances, and cover-ups. My mind raced as I connected the dots. These were not just random incidents. There was a pattern, a dark secret that the school had been hiding for years. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the gravity of my discovery. I had stumbled upon something much bigger than I had anticipated. The caretaker was not just a silent observer. He was involved in some way. The thought terrified me, but I was determined to uncover the truth. I knew I had to return and delve deeper into the mystery that was unfolding before me. The following night, I returned to the school, determined to uncover more of its secrets. This time, I decided to explore areas I hadn't ventured into before. Equipped with my flashlight and a newfound resolve, I navigated the dark empty hallways with caution. The atmosphere was even more foreboding than before, but I pressed on, driven by the need to know the truth. As I walked, I noticed an old, dusty map of the school mounted on the wall. Studying it closely, I found an area labeled basement that I had never seen or heard of. Intrigued, I followed the map's directions, eventually arriving at a hidden staircase behind a large, rusted filing cabinet. The staircase was steep and narrow, leading down into the depths of the building. The basement was dark and musty, the air thick with dust and the scent of mildew. My flashlight beam danced over old, broken furniture and forgotten supplies. As I ventured further, I stumbled upon a series of small rooms, each filled with peculiar objects and documents. One room in particular caught my attention. It was locked, but the lock looked old and fragile. Using a paperclip from my backpack, I managed to pick the lock and enter the room. Inside, I found stacks of personal belongings, clothes, backpacks, notebooks, all covered in a thick layer of dust. My heart sank as I realized these items must have belonged to the students who had disappeared. Among the belongings, I found several diaries, each telling a harrowing story of fear and confusion. Reading through the diaries, I learned that the students had experienced strange phenomena, unexplained noises, shadowy figures, and a pervasive sense of dread. They had tried to report their experiences, but no one believed them. The more I read, the clearer it became that these students were being silenced, their stories buried along with their possessions. As I delved deeper into the diaries, I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, my flashlight revealing nothing but darkness. My nerves were on edge, every sound amplified by the silence. Gathering my courage, I continued reading, determined to understand what had happened. The last diary entry was particularly chilling. It described a hidden room beneath the basement, where unspeakable things had occurred. Determined to find this hidden room, I searched the basement more thoroughly. Behind a large, old bookshelf, I discovered a trapdoor, just as the diary had described. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a narrow passageway leading further into the darkness. With my flashlight in hand, I descended into the unknown, aware that I was venturing into the heart of the school's darkest secrets. Descending into the narrow passageway, I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in around me. The air was damp and cold, and the walls seemed to close in tighter with each step I took. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. The passage led to a small, dimly lit room. In the center, there was a large, wooden table covered with old, yellow documents and photographs. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, each drawer labeled with names I recognized from the diaries. My heart pounded as I realized the magnitude of my discovery. This was the hidden room where the school's dark secrets were kept. As I sifted through the documents, I uncovered records of experiments and surveillance notes on the missing students. It became clear that the students had been subjects in some kind of clandestine project, overseen by a shadowy group within the school's administration. The caretaker's involvement became evident as well. He was not a perpetrator but a reluctant participant, trying to protect the students as best he could. Suddenly, I heard voices and footsteps approaching the passageway. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. Frantically, I looked for a place to hide and found a narrow space behind one of the filing cabinets. I squeezed in, holding my breath, and turned off my flashlight just as the door creaked open. Two men entered the room, their voices low and conspiratorial. I recognized one of them as the principal, his stern face illuminated by the dim light. The other was a man I had never seen before, but his presence exuded authority. They spoke in hushed tones about the need to continue their work and the potential consequences if their activities were discovered. My heart raced as I listened, the weight of their words sinking in. After what felt like an eternity, the men left, their voices fading into the distance. I waited for a few moments to ensure they were gone before emerging from my hiding spot. My mind was reeling from the information I had overheard. I knew I had to act quickly. Gathering as many documents as I could, I stuffed them into my backpack and hurried back up the passageway. I reached the top of the stairs, I bumped into my friend, Alex. He had noticed my absence and came looking for me. Quickly, I explained everything I had discovered, showing him the documents as proof. His eyes widened with shock and determination. Together, we left the school, vowing to bring the truth to light. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but with the evidence we had gathered, we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The caretaker's warning had led us to uncover a darkness that had been hidden for far too long. Now, it was up to us to ensure that justice was served and that the school was made safe for everyone. The next morning, Alex and I met at a local cafe, our backpacks filled with the incriminating documents. We knew we had to act fast before the administration could cover their tracks. As we sipped our coffee, we discussed our plan to expose the school's dark secrets. It was clear that we needed to involve the authorities and the media to ensure the truth was revealed. We first went to the local police station, presenting the evidence to a skeptical officer. His initial doubt turned to shock as he read through the documents. He immediately called for his superior, and soon, an investigation team was assembled. The police assured us they would handle the situation discreetly to avoid alerting the school's administration. Our next stop was the local newspaper. We met with a seasoned journalist who listened intently to our story. She was intrigued and agreed to help us bring the truth to the public. She promised to write an in-depth exposé, using the documents we provided as proof. Her enthusiasm and determination gave us hope that justice would be served. As the police investigation progressed, the school's administration began to feel the pressure. The principal and other key figures were questioned, and the caretaker was brought in for his testimony. It became clear that he had been trying to protect the students from within, using his limited power to safeguard them as best he could. The story broke in the newspaper, creating a wave of outrage and demands for accountability. Parents, students, and community members rallied together, calling for a thorough investigation and reform. The dark secrets of the school, once buried and hidden, were now laid bare for all to see. The authorities took swift action, arresting those involved in the clandestine project. The school board was replaced, and new measures were implemented to ensure the safety and well-being of the students. The caretaker, once a silent guardian, was hailed as a hero for his efforts to protect the students despite the risks he faced. With the school's dark past exposed, a sense of relief washed over the community. The halls that once echoed with fear and secrecy were now filled with hope and a renewed sense of safety. The students could finally attend school without the shadow of danger looming over them. As for Alex and me, our lives returned to a semblance of normalcy. The experience had changed us, but it also brought us closer together. We knew we had made a difference, and that was a feeling that would stay with us forever. The caretaker's warning had led us down a path of discovery, courage, and ultimately, justice. And as the school year continued, we walked its halls with pride, knowing we had played a part in making it a better place for everyone. Story 2, Trapped in the Dark. The caretaker's warning was clear: never stay in the school after dark. But on the evening of February 4th, 2024, I found myself ignoring his words. The school was eerily silent, the usual bustling sounds of students and teachers replaced by an unsettling quiet. Curiosity had gotten the better of me, and I was determined to prove that the stories were just that, stories. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the hallways, I made my way to the science wing. The dim lights flickered above, creating a haunting atmosphere. I wandered through the empty corridors, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The air felt colder, and a sense of unease settled over me. But I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Suddenly, a distant noise caught my attention. It sounded like a faint tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. The noise led me to an old, disused section of the school, one that hadn't been renovated in years. The walls were cracked, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. I reached a locked door at the end of the hallway. The tapping was louder now, coming from the other side. Using a paperclip from my pocket, I picked the lock and cautiously opened the door. Inside, I found an old janitor's closet, filled with dusty supplies and broken equipment. But the tapping continued, drawing me further into the darkness. In the corner of the closet, hidden beneath a pile of old rags, I discovered a small, hidden trapdoor. My hands trembled as I pried it open, revealing a narrow, descending staircase. The air that wafted up was stale and musty. I hesitated, but my curiosity pushed me forward. I descended the steps, my flashlight cutting through the inky blackness. The staircase led to a long, dark tunnel. The walls were lined with strange markings, and the air was thick with an unidentifiable scent. My flashlight flickered, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The tapping had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. I took a deep breath and continued down the tunnel, each step echoing ominously in the confined space. As I ventured deeper, the sense of being watched grew stronger. The darkness seemed to close in around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. But I pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the school. Little did I know, my decision to ignore the caretaker's warning would lead me into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. The tunnel seemed endless, the oppressive darkness pressing in on all sides. My flashlight cast long, eerie shadows that danced on the damp walls. Each step I took felt heavier, the silence broken only by the sound of my own breathing. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. As I continued down the tunnel, I noticed strange markings on the walls. They looked like old carvings, almost as if someone had scratched them into the stone long ago. Some resembled symbols, while others seemed to form words in a language I couldn't understand. The air grew colder, and I shivered despite my jacket. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was no one there. The whispering continued, a soft, sibilant sound that sent chills down my spine. I quickened my pace, hoping to find an exit or some clue to the tunnel's purpose. I came across an old wooden door, partially ajar, at the end of the tunnel. The whispering grew louder as I approached, almost as if it was calling to me. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small and cluttered, filled with old furniture and dusty books. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror. The mirror's surface was covered in grime, but as I wiped it clean, I saw my reflection staring back at me. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I turned, but there was no one there. My reflection, however, remained still, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I looked closer at the mirror, trying to understand what was happening. As I did, my reflection began to change. Its expression twisted into a look of fear and desperation. It raised a hand, pointing towards a book on a nearby table. My heart raced as I picked up the book, its cover worn and faded. Opening the book, I found pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches. They detailed strange rituals and experiments, all centered around the school's history. The more I read, the more I realized that the school had been the site of dark and disturbing activities for decades. The students who had disappeared were not just missing, they had been taken. The whispering grew louder, almost frantic, and I knew I had to leave. Clutching the book, I backed out of the room and closed the door behind me. The tunnel seemed even darker now, the sense of dread overwhelming. I had to find a way out, but the path back seemed to twist and turn in ways I didn't remember. As I stumbled through the darkness, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I couldn't shake the sensation that something was following me, just out of sight. My flashlight flickered, and I felt a surge of panic. I needed to find the exit before my courage failed me entirely. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, my sense of direction failing me in the oppressive darkness. My flashlight flickered intermittently, casting ghostly shadows that danced on the rough stone walls. My breaths came in shallow gasps as I fought to keep my composure, every nerve in my body on high alert. As I pressed forward, I noticed more of the strange markings on the walls. They seemed to form a pattern, guiding me deeper into the labyrinth. The whispering voices grew louder, more insistent, as if urging me onward. I tried to focus on the path ahead, but the oppressive sense of dread weighed heavily on my mind. I reached another intersection, the tunnel splitting into two separate paths. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but curiosity and a desire to uncover the truth pushed me forward. Choosing the right-hand path, I continued into the unknown, my footsteps echoing eerily in the confined space. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its walls lined with ancient, decaying bookshelves. The air was thick with dust and the scent of mildew. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table, covered with more of the strange documents and sketches. I approached cautiously, my flashlight revealing disturbing images of experiments and rituals performed on students. As I examined the documents, I heard a noise behind me, a soft, shuffling sound. I turned quickly, my flashlight illuminating a figure standing at the entrance of the chamber. It was the caretaker. His face was lined with worry, and his eyes darted around the room nervously. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice a harsh whisper. "I warned you. I had to know the truth," I replied, my voice trembling. "What is this place? What happened to the students?" The caretaker sighed, his shoulders slumping. "This school has a dark past," he began. "Years ago, a group of teachers and administrators conducted experiments on the students, believing they could unlock hidden potentials and abilities, but it all went horribly wrong. Many students disappeared, and those who remained were changed forever." I stared at him, my mind reeling from the revelation. "Why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I tried," he said, his voice filled with regret. "But they were powerful, and they silenced anyone who opposed them. I did what I could to protect the students, but it wasn't enough." The whispering voices grew louder, almost deafening, and I realized they were coming from the bookshelves. The caretaker looked around frantically. "We need to leave," he said urgently. "They know we're here." As we turned to leave, the ground beneath us began to shake. The tunnel walls seemed to close in, and the whispering voices turned into agonized screams. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. I grabbed the caretaker's arm, and we stumbled back through the tunnel, desperate to escape. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, and I could feel unseen eyes following our every move. The caretaker led me through the twisting passageways, his familiarity with the tunnels our only hope. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the base of the stairs that led back to the basement. Back in the safety of my home, I couldn't shake the events of the previous night from my mind. The caretaker's revelation, the dark tunnel, and the haunting whispers haunted my thoughts. I knew we had to act fast. The caretaker and I had agreed to meet at a nearby cafe to plan our next steps. The cafe was bustling with the usual morning crowd, a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the school. We found a quiet corner and spread out the documents I had taken from the tunnel. The caretaker's face was etched with determination as he examined the papers, his eyes scanning the incriminating evidence. "We need to get these to the authorities and the media," he said, his voice low. "The world needs to know what happened at that school." I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. "But we have to be careful. They won't go down without a fight." We spent the next few hours meticulously organizing the documents, creating a timeline of events and identifying key figures involved in the experiments. The caretaker provided valuable insights, his years of silent observation now serving as a critical resource. As we worked, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of urgency. The darkness we had uncovered was too dangerous to be kept hidden any longer. Our first stop was the local police station. We presented our evidence to a detective, who listened intently as we recounted our findings. The detective's skepticism gradually turned to concern as he reviewed the documents. He assured us that an investigation would be launched immediately, and additional security would be placed at the school to prevent any further incidents. Next, we approached a local journalist known for her investigative work. She was intrigued by our story and agreed to help us expose the school's dark past. She promised to write a comprehensive article, using the documents as evidence, and to conduct interviews with former students and staff who might have more information. As we left the journalist's office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We had taken the first steps toward justice, but I knew the road ahead would be challenging. The school's administration would not take this lightly, and we had to be prepared for their retaliation. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with thoughts of what we had uncovered. The faces of the missing students haunted my dreams, their eyes filled with a silent plea for justice. I knew that our actions had set in motion a chain of events that could not be undone. The caretaker's warning had led us down a path of discovery, and now it was up to us to see it through. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The police investigation gained momentum, and the journalist's article sparked public outrage. Parents, students, and community members demanded answers and accountability. The school's administration was placed under intense scrutiny, and several high-ranking officials were suspended pending the investigation's outcome. Through it all, the caretaker remained a steadfast ally. His knowledge and experience were invaluable, and his quiet strength gave me the courage to keep pushing forward. Together, we had uncovered a darkness that had been hidden for too long, and now we were determined to bring it into the light. As the investigation continued, more details emerged about the experiments and the fate of the missing students. The school's dark history was finally being brought to justice, and the community rallied together to support those who had been affected. The caretaker's warning had been a beacon in the darkness, guiding us toward the truth. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, we knew that we had made a difference. The days turned into weeks as the investigation into the school's dark past unfolded. The authorities uncovered a web of deception and cruelty that shocked the entire community. The media coverage brought national attention to our small town, and the pressure on the school's administration intensified. Through it all, the caretaker and I remained vigilant, knowing that our work was far from over. The caretaker and I became local heroes, our actions praised by parents and students alike. But the praise felt hollow knowing the extent of the suffering that had taken place. We attended community meetings, shared our findings, and provided support to the families affected by the school's dark history. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but we bore it with a sense of purpose. One evening, as I was sorting through the last of the documents, I received a call from the caretaker. His voice was tense, and I could hear the urgency in his tone. "Meet me at the school. There's something you need to see," he said before hanging up abruptly. My heart pounded as I made my way to the school. The building loomed in the twilight, its silhouette a stark reminder of the horrors hidden within. I found the caretaker waiting at the entrance, his expression grave. Without a word, he led me to the basement, to the hidden room where it all began. Inside, he pointed to a section of the wall that had been partially concealed by a large cabinet. "I found this while cleaning," he said, his voice low. "There's more to this place than we realized." We moved the cabinet aside, revealing a hidden door. My heart raced as we opened it, the hinges creaking ominously. Behind the door was a small room, its walls lined with photographs and personal items belonging to the missing students. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized this was a memorial of sorts, a place where the victims were remembered by those who had silenced them. The caretaker and I carefully examined the room, documenting everything we found. It was clear that this hidden chamber held crucial evidence that would further implicate those responsible. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the oppressive silence pressing down on us. Suddenly, the caretaker froze, his eyes widening in fear. "We need to leave now," he whispered urgently. "They're coming." We grabbed the documents and rushed out of the room, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us. Panic set in as we navigated the dark corridors, our only goal to escape before it was too late. The caretaker led the way, his familiarity with the school our saving grace. We burst out of the building, gasping for breath. The cool night air was a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness we had just escaped. As we stood there, catching our breath, I realized the gravity of our situation. We had uncovered a truth that many wanted to keep buried, and they would stop at nothing to silence us. The caretaker turned to me, his expression resolute. "We need to get this to the authorities immediately. This is the evidence we need to bring them down." We made our way to the police station, our hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The documents we had found importance of vigilance and accountability. As for the caretaker and me, we found solace in knowing that our actions had made a difference. The caretaker's warning had led us down a path of discovery and justice, and though the journey was fraught with danger, we had emerged victorious. The school reopened months later, transformed into a place of learning and safety. The dark secrets that once lurked within its walls were now exposed, and the community was stronger for it. The caretaker's warning would never be forgotten, a testament to the power of truth and the importance of never giving up.